Hey friends, I figured I'd conclude our playthrough of episode 5 with a deep dive review. Reactions, analysis, conclusions, maybe some stories from TLD yesteryear. We'll let it take us wherever it takes us. Just to be upfront about where I'm coming from, I was never the harshest critic of Wintermute episodes to begin with. They were little diversions from my survival long plays. My favorite is episode 3 due to the strong Halloween vibe. I mean, it was released a week before Halloween back in 2019, and it had fun turns into the supernatural with those regional tall tale side quests. Not to mention, the main supporting character was Molly, an Annie Wilkes analog.
So, when you came in, I heard you locking a padlock. Same thing when you went out. Am I locked in here?
It's better for you to stay indoors.
By contrast, my least favorite episode was 4. I found the convicts tiresome. They were well set up in episode 1 as people I'd possibly have to deal with, and episode 2 made it crystal clear that I would. But even on my first encounter with the character Mathis, back when he was voiced by Gord Marriott and sounded a lot like Methuselah, what's in the case?
What's in the case?
He was used for this fake out to suggest that maybe something had happened to Astrid.
Should I show you what happened to the last person who lied to me? She didn't look so pretty after I was done.
Which did stick in the community, by the way, because over 2 years passed between episodes 1 and 2 Predux and the release of episode 3. But since that fake out, and definitely through most of 4, I perceived Mathis as an ongoing plot contrivance, usually feeling like he was facilitating a story rather than producing one, and for some reason with him, things just always seem to occur just in the nick of time. It's a viewpoint that I think episode 5 supports rather than challenges. Besides, up to episode 4, I'd spent 5 years in survival as the only human alive, facing the geomagnetic phenomana's effects on nature, technology, and the world. About the last thing I wanted to do was spend 8 to 10 hours being lackey to some old world psycho. Full disclosure, I didn't walk into episode 5 after having spent 4 years waiting past delays, paid DLC, or the announcement of a sequel. I don't know that any of that would have bothered me so much, but we'll never know. I showed up about a week before it came out, and then it came out. However, I also came back to find that my 15-year interloper file had been removed from modern gameplay in that TLD-style save wipe, I guess so that they could make the paid DLC. 5 years after the game's formal release, 5 years after we were told no more save wipes. So I'm not without my baggage here. Oh, and if anyone from Hinterland ever happens to see this, there was a reference to me in episode 5. It's been a long time since I was someone in this community, and it caught me by surprise, but I am honored. Thank you. Let's review episode 5. Overall, the music and graphics were characteristically vibrant and pretty, notwithstanding a few visual glitches, which were several, and hopefully they get fixed. Great music and visuals have been a mainstay of TLD since I signed on almost 9 years ago, so it's always easy to take those for granted. There was less intermittent music in the world than I was used to. I don't know if that was always true of story mode, but in survival there'd be tracks playing all day long, and I definitely noticed the quiet. Going into specific parts, we'll do this by the numbers. Part 1 kicked off by introducing, either by dream or hypnopompic hallucination, a child named Jack, Astrid and Will's son. I mean, it's not definitively stated here, or ever for that matter, but come on, it's their son. I like that we didn't have to wait all episode to have the mystery of the broken family photo revealed, but I'm not gonna like it later on when I realize that's all we're gonna get, but I'll come back to that towards the end. And it was really nice to finally meet Jane Yang, though she did sound a touch different.
This is my home. You made it. To Perseverance Mills.
Dr. Greenwood speaking.
Did you get it?
I told you not to call here.
I'm sorry, but I'm scared. It's getting worse. We have to do something.
Astrid, you came. You said you would, and you did. But where is the case? Where's the cure?
Wouldn't be the first time that a minor character with just a couple of voice lines ended up being voiced by someone else when their role substantialized, but Jessica Wong did very well. The introduction of Perseverance Mills almost 9 years after it was first referenced by Grey Mother, or I guess you could say found written in blood by Astrid and then referenced in Grey Mother back in episode 1, well, either way, I could not imagine the reveal being done any better. That initial visual of exiting the Yang residence atop a steep incline, it was very well done. Perseverance is pretty to look at with that usual TLD charm, though to renew an old-timer's gripe, personally, I think the game looked best in 2017 and I would have preferred to see it that way. I didn't envision Perseverance as an oceanside dock town, though I guess that was alluded to or at least supported by the end of episode 4. Perseverance was fun to explore, though there were a number of locations that I thought would be accessible later that we never ended up revisiting. Locked houses, a locked church. Damn, now that I think about it, the mill itself, we never went inside. So now I'm wondering if I missed access points to any or maybe all of those. The absence of wolves in the main part of town subverted my expectations, though I'm very confident there's one in the back hills. We just didn't encounter it during my playthrough. Perseverance Wilds certainly lived up to its name, and I think if you asked me what I was expecting from episode 5, the answer would have been a little Perseverance Mills and a little Perseverance Wilds. And I've seen some people criticize the episode's lack of traditional survival gameplay, and I guess I'd have to ask what they consider traditional survival gameplay to be. Part 1 here and the next part of part 1 was basically story mode's classic version of traditional non-linear survival. There were some differences. I noticed at some point in our playthrough, around the time we found the constable, I think, that skills weren't in the game anymore, and I certainly missed those. There was a point where it occurred to me that my usual scavenging behavior felt unnecessary here in ways that wasn't true in other episodes. I think a little food, clothing, first aid, some weapons, that would have been enough. Crafting opportunities were few, just that one work table in the north part of the wilds, if memory serves, and I wasn't finding so many optional notes with flavor text. And in that vein, I definitely missed having quirky little side quests here and episode long. During our playthrough, I encountered some trouble. That quirky boat key that we found after leaving the boathouse, my revolver was found in shoddy shape, and I never did find a firearm cleaning kit for Astrid, but it is possible that I missed it. Some folks missed the hatchet, or at least a hatchet, so maybe I missed the kit. The prospect of going into the wilds to find those 3 people, it had me wondering if I'd maybe be carrying them back a la episode 3. But once I found the third person, for us that was the patient, the game took the reins and faded to black.
Move these bodies back to Larson's clinic. An autopsy's the only way I'll get...
It's fortunate in my case, but I could see that being a pain if you were sticking around to craft or something. Moving to the second half of part 1, post Tommy, into Desperation Bay in the boat, I don't think it's going to be controversial when I call this peak story mode. I've never had a better time in Wintermute. I raved over Desperation Bay during my playthrough, and I'll rave over it right here. The trip was a lot of fun, starting with the transition cave that had me on guard for indoor wolves. We never ended up getting one, but subverted expectations can be fun too. I thoroughly enjoyed the bay itself, even if I struggled with now being completely washed. Blah. And our revolver woes and so on did limit my prospects for uncovering all of the bay's mysteries, so I doubt that I did. But we were able to find our way into the heights easily enough and make our way into the birch maze. Being waylaid by a midday blizzard on low water brought back some classic survival feels to the mix. And then we were able to make our way to the Maru easily enough, heading there the next morning. My compliment to Desperation Bay's designers. It would have been a lot of fun to survive here during our 15-year days, and the Maru was itself a good deal of fun. I thought it had the right combination of mystery/investigation, suspense, surprise, and horror. It was nicely done. I would have liked an event or 2 more to break up the pace, and I could have definitely stood to hear more from the doctor about how people were losing track of themselves in time. You know, some patient notes or an impromptu field study would have been great, but the absence of that didn't diminish my fun. About the only thing I didn't like in part 1 was the conclusion. Astrid running to Cooper's blind was itself interesting, and it showed Astrid's breaking point as she proceeded to convey urgency in about the least compelling way possible.
Listen to me. If you want to live, everything that is happening right now is somehow connected to the Aurora. I can't explain how, but I know we are not safe here.
But I was sorry to see Mathis for all the reasons I set out at the beginning. I was very happy to be done with him in part 4, and I'd hope we never see him again, naive though that was. That brings us to part 2. I didn't realize that the end of part 1 would also mark the end of non-linear traditional survival gameplay, but at the risk of getting ahead of myself, I really didn't mind it. Taking the long view of Wintermute with Will, I'd had one episode of traditional survival as storyfied, one with traditional survival culminating in a quirky stealth section, that last part I'm not so fond of, and a traditional survival section with increasing puzzle elements. So non-traditional survival was foreseeable, and I was fine with it. But if someone came into this expecting to see more of what TLD does best, and plenty of it, I could imagine that their review of this might be that part 1 saved the best for first. But I didn't mind it at all. Most of part 2 invoked other aspects of the Long Dark. I thought the survival evasion part of the Cold Broken Road was good fun. It was nice to see Will again, and it reminded me a bit of starting a new Interloper run, though again storyfied, linear, and without the ability to sleep. And I cannot lie, those are some pretty big butts, though it didn't terribly diminish the experience. Hinterland tried to anticipate that I'd get into at least one wolf struggle.
What happened to you? You look like hell. Are those teeth marks?
What?
I met some old friends along the way.
No, I didn't. Well, you underestimated me, dog. What can I say? And it seemed apparent to me that Jason Will's evasion strategy of avoiding two convicts who thought they were dead by confirming life and giving them footprints to track, all of that was purposed towards ensuring a showdown, not avoiding one.
Up you go.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
You be careful now.
Don't worry about me.
Hey! Hey, convict assholes! Hey! Over here!
So I wasn't surprised when one occurred. And of course, this whole thing...
Holy shit! Get down!
During my playthrough, I called it dream logic. I'm gonna stand by that. And you know what? If you're gonna spawn the case to deflect gunshots, I sure could have used that back in part 4. I don't really have too much to say about the mine slog. It was straightforward enough, and we only encountered one disappearing Jace bug, and we were able to quickly recover from that. The mine really didn't advance anything in the story as far as I'm concerned. There was elevator side chatter between Jace and Will, where Jace declines to go into Astrid's research. Will declines to speculate on the contents of the case.
You have no idea what Dr. Atwood's doing up here, do you?
I mean, mostly.
Mostly?
Yeah.
Must be.
You mean you don't know what's inside?
Nope.
And you're risking your life to bring it back to her?
Yep.
Mackenzie,
Yes, Jace?
you're kind of a strange guy.
Right.
And of course, there was the massive troll of the mine collapsing when you approach the gear stash. At the end, you skip forward in time and head to Suzuki Tower. If they had done that in lieu of the mine, it would have been all the same to me. And that brings us to high energy. If you saw my videos, then you already know. We spent all this time going all this way to relay a single word message to Atwood.
I was sent here to find you.
Sent here? By whom?
Guy by the name of Jeremiah.
What was the message?
He said to tell you Wintermute.
Wintermute. Jeremiah and Wintermute. I haven't heard those names in a long, long time.
What does it mean?
It means things are much, much worse than I feared. Please leave me now. I need quiet.
So of course, upon relaying it, she had no response. She needed some emotional recovery time instead. So we'll come back to that. I thought the dream sequence taking place in Jackrabbit Remote Transport was very cool, even if it never really went anywhere. And I wasn't kidding when I said that deck of cards would end up being merch, and Will's slumber was disrupted by Jace because now Atwood's feeling chatty.
Ah, good. You're awake. Atwood wants us to meet her in the control room. I think she was up all night.
And Will tells himself that he needs to get out of here.
I have to get the hell out of here.
That urgency is lost the moment Atwood requires next task, and then we got our briefing for the run-and-gun gauntlet portion of High Energy, with Jace insisting that Atwood warn him about the animals acting strange due to the high elevation. A point I note because I'm gonna bring it up again in a minute. The gauntlet was fun. It felt very timed, hopeless rescue with bites. It does help that we didn't get food poisoning by eating some of the station's low-quality food and not being able to sleep. But as I demonstrated in that one video, even with food poisoning, it is possible to squeak by. But I absolutely lost my shit over the very slow back and forth between Jace and Will as my mission time ticked down. But here in the review, I'm gonna tease the gameplay and technical aspects from the characters. The phone calls between Jace and Will, they're a callback to their phone banter in episode 4, but if we're being honest, those also went on a touch too long for my liking. But that's their dynamic, and their dynamic is a part of the story, and yeah, okay, it is what it is. Fine. On the other hand, here, time is ticking down as a slowish conversation occurs 4 times over. That's just unfair, especially when talking about 13 to 15 of 90 minutes at the end. And it has the effect of pitting the narration against the mission completion. And it felt that way regardless of whether I had enough time. And I'll go out on a limb and suspect that's the opposite of what they're going for here. So respectfully, I hope they at least freeze the time during those phone conversations, if they haven't already. As for the conversation and the characters, I said at the time that these chats didn't match the urgency of the moment, but if you step back, I mean, that's been happening this whole time. Atwood needed emotional recovery time, but then suddenly time is of the essence when it's time for Will to act. Jace is preaching time is of the essence for her precious dissertation, but she's calling 4 times to bullshit. Jace and Atwood are screaming time is of the essence, but they have time to bicker about whether Jace actually needs your help. Okay, so they're self-involved. Being self-involved in an emergency while expecting others to act, perform, rush, that's the basis for a character critique, not a technical one. And besides, if you take everything back 1,000 feet, what is Wintermute if not the story of an ex-couple heading to Perseverance Mills in no particular hurry? The second half of High Energy with the wheels was fine, except Jace taking a bit too long to get us there. A fade to black would have been nice. I'm told if you find a way to run ahead of her, it actually does that for you, which is good to know. And aside from a clunky dialogue line that confused me and no one else,
look for the console with the big wheel on it. Come on, Mackenzie.
it was nice to have something simple to do over pretty visuals and music as a palate cleanser after all that rushing in the gauntlet. The 18-minute cutscene didn't bother me, aside from the game's self-referential line, but I'd be lying if I claimed to have soaked up all the lore in that single pass. And here at the end, I really don't feel any urgent need to try and understand the astrophysics of it all. During the playthrough, I criticized the delay in revealing the lore, and I'll abandon that criticism in part. My criticism was that Jeremiah didn't tell us any of this. Jeremiah wasn't going to. Jeremiah wasn't interested in telling us anything about his past, and Atwood gave us plenty of reasons why. What was he going to say? I went to military prison for accessing classified information and passing it on to a researcher in furtherance of investigating a phenomena that the more I try to explain, you will believe less and less, just like everyone else. So let's let the research lady in the science tower do the explaining if she wants to. But I do think 9 years to introduce the lore is way too long. There is a reference to Rudiger, which I think is a reference to the DLC. So maybe some of you have been combing through the lore for a couple of years already, but that doesn't help story players. And as for Wintermute and Atwood's time to think, I think it's pretty clear this had little to nothing to do with the message we relayed, so much as who it was from. Based on witnessing the first flare, an observation that wildlife is acting unusual, and an ability to relay a radio message, Canadian Jeremiah Johnson entrusts Will with the message Wintermute to be delivered to Atwood because he can't go himself due to injuries he sustained in his encounter with the old bear. Many episodes later, we relay that message that turns out to be the name of a man whose warning has inspired Atwood's life's work. So it's not like the name isn't routinely on our mind and the phenomena underway is some kind of abstraction. And though we never relayed Jeremiah's observations, it'll garner absolutely no surprise to Atwood, because she conveys something quite similar to us at Jace's insistence during the briefing before the gauntlet. So I find it very hard to believe that this really had anything to do with what we were conveying so much as on whose behalf. Jeremiah, who stayed close to be near her. So we pretty much just relayed proof of life and thereby gained access to the lore. Part 3. Overall, Part 3 gameplay-wise was straight up fun. It started with a cutscene, Mathis forcing Astrid to treat his son, Donner, who likely has internal bleeding, thanks to the explosion back in episode 4. Problem is, they lack supplies to treat him. Jane suggests the trauma kit at a search and rescue station some ways off. So of course you send the only doctor who can actually treat your son to go and find it. I can't be the only one who found that strange. And I think just a simple line, maybe saying that nobody else would know what they're looking for, or acknowledging the risk, would have been enough. Her inevitable survival on that trip was taken for granted in exchange for Mathis's cliched, "she dies, you die, better hurry up, doctor," style banter. I would be remiss were I not to acknowledge that of the ways Hinterland has found to separate us from NPCs that would complicate our various trips throughout the game, Heller's "I don't wanna" is probably my favorite. On the heels of the high energy crash out, I gave it a couple of weeks between finishing Part 2 and playing Part 3, citing the numerous bugs that people were reporting out of Part 3 and wanting the best experience possible. I don't know what my experience would have been had we not waited, but pretty much everything during this section felt polished and straightforward, with my only real gripe at the outset being that they inexplicably took away my well-fed bonus. About midway through the trip to the station, I encountered a switch that took us in a reverse direction, and I thought maybe I'd found a secret, but we couldn't bypass the gate at reverse momentum, which made it clear that this was for the trip back. And that's kinda strange. I would have thought if I went to the trouble of clearing a path there, I'd use the same path back. But the truth is, I didn't even try in favor of seeing all the things, so I don't know what happens if you try to go back the same way. About the only snag I encountered was when the train got us as close to the star station as it could, because it wasn't obvious to me.
Blocking the path. Just need to get it out of the way.
Something was obstructing the switch's path. Okay, what? The controls are locked. Okay, why? And then Astrid is saying that she can go the rest of the way on foot.
I can get off and walk from here.
And this barrage of information briefly left me confused, but then again, I didn't check for a map either. Luckily, we eventually found it. The day gradually passing into a nighttime return trip by Aurora Light was a lot of fun. Even the switchyard puzzle. I'm sure I could have done this a lot better, used coal more judiciously and so on, so I don't really have any criticisms to that end. Overall, it was a good time from start to finish when we returned to Heller, who was still standing next to his precious fire barrel. Hope he fucking marries it. Fair warning, you may have noticed I've been mostly complimentary of episode 5 up to this point. I hope you didn't get used to that, because for me, this is where things start to go off the rails. Pun always intended. When the story picks back up with Astrid already having treated Donner, saying it might not be enough and ultimately it won't be, she makes a point of saying that removing the hostages was a good idea. Like I said before, I see Mathis as a huge plot contrivance, facilitating story rather than producing it. So whenever Mathis acts, I mentally ask why story wanted him to do whatever he's doing, especially when they don't give me a reason. And then out of nowhere, Mathis concludes that maybe what's in the case might help Donner, because he's realized that Astrid and Will are connected somehow. Sure would have been nice to know how he reached that conclusion. You know, Jane might have given that up. Will never did. Mathis has seen the case in Mackenzie's possession and taken possession of it himself for a time. But the case is stolen work product. It's not like Astrid put a name tape on it or something. The only thing I can come up with is he just has Mackenzie on the brain, and he got lucky. By the way, since we're talking about connecting dots, nobody ever connects Astrid to Milton, where she shanked 2 of them and gave others the slip around the Milton schoolhouse and beyond. It's not like she didn't leave eyewitnesses. Mathis himself might have been one of them. And Astrid isn't making any observable connections either, especially for a woman who stabbed 2 men in prison outfits and is now surrounded by guys who still haven't switched out of their prison tops. Oh well, I guess. And her not explaining the case's contents seemed singularly purposed on not spoiling the big reveal for us. And all it got her was an unnecessary menacing. Because who cares if he knows the case has Alzheimer's vaccine? So let's play, why did Story have Mathis menace Astrid? Well, so Donner's abrupt arousal could save her. Donner offers a few cryptic words and then he dies. We didn't see him in part 4, but he reminds me a good bit of Pollux Troy from Face Off, though I don't know if that's intentional or just me. But like I said, Donner is past tense now. Mathis proceeds to nearly choke the life out of Astrid when who should appear? Jeremiah and Molly? Is your fellow one of the good ones that I hope I don't run into him? Full-blown misandrist Molly is here fighting alongside Jeremiah and calling him Jerry. Well, that's unexpected. Molly pins Mathis with 2 precision shots, but doesn't kill him or anyone because she has inexplicably found new respect for the sanctity of male human life. Jerry, throws a hatchet into Vashtion's sternum for the crime of standing there and looking around confused. Heller survives. That's nice. They pull Astrid out of the doctor's office and Molly says there's someone she needs to meet. Astrid mentions the residents that have been relocated and Jeremiah tells Molly to get Astrid to safety and he'll go rescue everyone he can. So part 5 picks up with Mathis and the convicts setting fire to Perseverance Mills. And I guess I'm just supposed to accept that as the inevitable consequence of his son dying or consistent with Milton. But it does ignore this vacillation between old world and new world that Mathis exhibited in parts 2 and 4. Locks are a thing of the old world. This is the new world where I reign. Part 4's I kept you alive because I thought you'd fly us to the old world, but then I realized, again I guess, that we can be kings here and I will reign here. And now we're back to burn it all down so I can be king of a graveyard. Maybe it is consistent for him, but on the other hand, Astrid had tried to get the dwellers of Cooper's Blind to go to ground and they refused, still very much clinging to the prospect of things one day returning to normal. And I refuse to find any of that coincidental. Meanwhile, Will is turned up in Perseverance Mills and he's off to the Yang residence to find Astrid. I wasn't expecting stealth with knocking people out from behind in my survival game, but I'm okay with it. It was straightforward enough. Didn't like that they took away all my gear from part 2, weapons that would have made quick work of the 5-6 prisoners. None of these assholes ever seem to be armed, but somehow they're always calling the shots. And they took away Will's clothing, so you're goddamn freezing half the time. For some reason, all of the fires don't warm him up. Despite all of that, I didn't really have much trouble with this. I managed to do it on one pass, so maybe it's impossible to fail. Good thing, too, because there were times when I was sneaking like 2 feet in front of a convict. You know, I can't be the only one that thinks sneaking isn't a very Will Mackenzie thing to do, but I guess that isn't my call to make. Interestingly, Will seems to know where Jane Yang lives. If I were to start criticizing characters' miraculous knowledge of locations, in fairness, I would have had to have started much earlier. So we got to the Yang residence, and I was surprised that I didn't get burned here. Maybe it's impossible, or the hitbox is like Raven Falls Trestle level of generous given the narrow space. Will proceeds around the house until the roof finally collapses on him. And I kinda like that the minigame was futile those first couple times. Then Jeremiah shows up. I don't need every last mystery resolved. Let's just say he saw Will sneaking around and followed the trail of incapacitated prisoners. Yeah, let's go with that. But hey, Jerry, 30 seconds earlier and we're not walking into this burning death trap, you know? Jeremiah pulls Will out. Will coughs a good deal from the smoke inhalation. Now, if you remember Predux, then you'll remember the game's quirky trust system and that Jeremiah liked pork and beans a lot. Will remembers that too. And let's just say that the smoke and the burning Yang residence was preferable by comparison to the smell in Trapper Homestead, and I'll leave it at that. Jeremiah sort of implies through process of elimination, that Atwood and or Jace is responsible for their being here. The logistics and character holes are never going to be explained. How they got here, why Molly would be here working with Jeremiah if her hatred of men was that deep-seated, and I think I have an idea as to why. But put a pin in that for now. Then, finally, 9 years in the making, Astrid and Will have their reunion. It's a touching moment. It really is. But this is our opportunity to get answers to all kinds of things, up to and including why the fuck did she take off? Sure, they tried to address that at the beginning of episode 3, but if you bought that as complete, then I guess you're just easier than I am. I didn't want a duo survival experience. None of us did. And that's fortunate because I don't think Hinterland could have provided that. And there's a few events that would have went catastrophically wrong had they been together. From the encounter with the prisoners, the narrow gap from Milton to PV, Molly, so on and so forth. But I want the technicals and the gameplay experience to shore up with the narrative, though I certainly appreciate that things need to be conveyed naturally. I think a single line could have accomplished that here, and if you're keeping count, it's one of many instances where that's true. Instead, we kind of get J.J. Abrams the little via the, what difference does it make as long as they're reunited? Also, Jace is here. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. So Will and Astrid share a few words, then in the episode's biggest plot hole, Will tells the group to take Astrid to the tower because there's one thing left he needs to do. And it becomes crystal clear that we're not going to get a big playthrough finale, like something that switches between Astrid and Will, or they work together on something, which would have been very cool and kind of felt missing in the episode. So what does Will need to do? Well, he needs to isolate himself from a friendly group in a burning town surrounded by convicts so that he can have a showdown with Mathis. I mean, he needs to broadcast a radio message. And I think this is why they sidestep how Jace or whomever contacted Jeremiah and Molly, because the same method they used there at a satellite tower could probably be used to broadcast the message on loop. Keep in mind that the reason a lot of this is happening is because Raphael has future plans for Will. He's been asked and accused of making choices in this episode exclusively to set up Black Frost, which he denies. Though I'd bet you anything that Will's radio message, which we're about to get to, will end up in a teaser for Black Frost or as an Easter egg. Take my bet? But saying that this wasn't designed with Black Frost in mind isn't the same as saying he doesn't have future plans for Will, which he has confirmed. So if any of this feels a little contrived in the name of vision or future plans, maybe that's why. For what it's worth, I did like having control of Will up to the tower for one last little jaunt. So Will records his message, and I want you to note that it's all claims, no substance. See, but if Will hadn't experienced the things he's describing, he probably wouldn't believe it either. And conspicuously omitted from this message is any reference point to the loss of power or recent effects on technology. Why would you not weave a warning through the plainest, least controversial, and observable effect on your way to making claims about wildlife and more far-fetched claims about humans is beyond me. All I'm saying is, if you're going to do something ridiculous so the character can be preserved for future works, then at least make the separation and efforts plausible. After finishing his message, Will pulls out an old family photo from his pocket, mercifully having survived all of his adventures, including his time in Black Rock's River, and we get to see Jack again, but for the last time. We will never find out how he died. We will not find out the specifics of how it tore Astrid and Will's marriage apart, but there is little hints in the intro dialogue. You're still a doctor? I thought that after what? Did something about Jack dying, possible illness, or Astrid's inability to save him make her rethink her vocation? Will hasn't heard from her since, what? Their kid died and she left? On a dime, or after the loss reduced their dynamic to ash? I think about him all the time, you know. I know you do. Careful line that sets up Will as maybe being a little more forthcoming. Seemingly doesn't blame her if she blames herself, which we don't know to be true. But that careful acknowledgement of Will's feelings also has the effect of conceding nothing about her own. She's a little more guarded and doesn't want to get into that in this forced interaction for some greater purpose. We've gotten so little about these characters over the years beyond what they do for a living, and that Will is or was a functioning alcoholic and is definitely more stubborn than you. All these little questions were interlaced within the narrative to create mysteries and questions, and on the back end, there is very little payoff, and that is incredibly disappointing. This whole time during the sequence in the radio tower, the camera has continued to pan towards the door. We all know what's coming and the story doesn't feel the need to hide it, so it's teasing us a little. Will takes himself a nap with his back to the door like you do, wakes up, door opens, and there is Mathis. Will loses what would charitably be called a slap fight, which is bizarre because hours earlier, Mathis took an arrow to each shoulder. Then we proceed from "you killed my son, prepare to die" to "I almost killed your ex, but I know where she is, so let's go finish this now," conveniently getting no resistance from Will. That brings us to the epilogue, and I'm so glad I did no commentary for that video because it would have been just 2 minutes of me yelling, "Shoot them." Jeremiah and Molly, both armed, are well aware of what these convicts are about. They rescued Astrid, they saw the fire, probably saw these assholes set it. So it's mighty bizarre that the whole sequence is allowed to happen. Will is clearly beat up, his hands are bound, and then he's kicked away. If you give me an opportunity to take a clear shot, then shit, don't mind if I do. Instead, Jeremiah puffs a bit. Then Mathis walks around a bunch, another opportunity, then holds a knife to Mackenzie, then does it again, then suddenly he's standing an arm's length behind him. At any point, Will can throw himself to the ground or accidentally fall over, but I wouldn't blame him for taking the chance given how many clear opportunities they've already missed. And I sincerely doubt the convicts would have shanked Will if Mathis had fallen. They'd be quite occupied trying not to be the next person shot. Will's important to us, not them. And you only get to kill him once and then you're all fucked. And making my point for me a little too late, we get to see this on the back end when a couple convicts go running for the entrance, now in the process of time locking, and absolutely nothing happens to Will when they fall. Mathis could give a rat's ass about them, and I bet they feel the same way. The exchange between Will and Astrid was fine, very last of the Mohicans. It's the last time they may see each other, why not let it all out? So Mathis conscripts Will, like none of us would expect. Will resigns to agreeing, like none of us would expect, but says he has one thing left to do, even though he said that one thing ago. And Mathis goes along with it, because, you see, Will is more stubborn than Mathis. And as we have learned, nothing outmatches stubborn. Not fists, not knives, not guns, and definitely not mean tweets. Stubborn carries the day. A glimpse of the Alzheimer's vaccine in the case. Nice of them not to Pulp Fiction us here. So we pick up at Milton, Grey Mother's house. Will carries Grey Mother's corpse to Milton Cemetery and cremates her atop a makeshift pyre next to Lily's grave. Touching, nice to see Grey Mother remembered, but without knowing how much time has passed, how did he know she'd be dead? I won't ask how she died. My guess is she probably, ended things. Will and Methuselah exchange a nod, and I continue to insist that Methuselah is future Will. And then we get a nice cutscene of people surviving in Suzuki Tower. Conspicuously missing is Father Thomas, because there's no proselytizing allowed in the tower. And that's it. So, overall, I thought episode 5 was fine. The gameplay was a lot of fun at best, and thing to get through at absolute worst. Most things I criticized may well be hotfixed in the future if they haven't been already, or they may not be an issue to anyone else. The narrative and the ending, I don't feel so good about that. Not because I wanted any particular ending. I would have just liked to seen the, I don't use these words lightly, I would have liked to have seen the narrative integrity of answering the hooks they pushed throughout the story, some from the beginning, and then the follow through and confidence to give this story a proper conclusion, whatever that means, that allowed these characters to conclusively fade away, while believing that the world of the Long Dark could survive and thrive without them. So I don't think this was the ending that the characters, players, and developers deserve. I honestly think this reflects someone not being ready to let go. Maybe they'll rethink that. Or maybe one day, way down the road, you'll see the consequence of these choices play out and decide that it all made sense in the end. I don't believe for a second that anyone who worked on this ever did so with the desire to disappoint me or you. I have always kept that in mind, even during the occasional moment of contention, and I hope you will as well, whatever your feelings about any of this. Finally, none of this changes the simple fact that the Long Dark survival mode remains in a league of its own. And since this may be the last time I get to say it, Hinterland and for my 5,887.6 hours spent playing this ever-expanding game, you have my sincere gratitude. Thanks to Alia for introducing me to it back in 2016. And also thanks to Geltaz, Gray, and Lexi W for helping to make it more accessible to me way back when during my formative years. So with that, I bid you adieu and all best. If you end up playing Black Frost and so on, I sure do hope you enjoy yourself. For what it's worth, though I will not be a part of that, I am rooting for it to succeed. Thanks so much for watching.